I didn't come to the ranch looking for love. Hell, I didn't even come looking for comfort. I came because I needed money, and I'd heard from a friend of a friend that the McAllister Ranch was hiring strong backs and quiet mouths. I had one of those, maybe both on a good day. The drive out took hours. My beat-up truck wheezed as the gravel gave way to open fields and wire fences. Cows dotted the hills like lazy clouds. The main house stood squat and weathered in the distance, flanked by long barns and rows of sheds. It smelled like dust, hay, and the kind of work that makes your muscles burn before the sun's even up. I parked near a tool shed, my boots hitting the dirt like I hadn't walked on solid ground in days. Maybe I hadn't. The world felt too big, too quiet. A man stepped out from the barn's shadow. He was broad, built like someone who didn't believe in taking shortcuts. Faded jeans, leather gloves in his back pocket, sweat-stained Stetson pulled low over sharp eyes. His shirt clung to him in places I shouldn't have noticed. "You the one a skin about work?" he asked, voice like gravel dragged across old wood. "Yeah," I said, clearing my throat. "Name's Dylan." He nodded once. "Wade, I run things around here. You show up on time, do what's asked, keep your drama to yourself. We'll get along fine." He stuck out his hand. I took it. His grip was strong, expected. But the way he held on for just a beat too long caught me off guard. His eyes didn't look away either. They just settled on mine like he was trying to read something beneath the surface. I pulled back and gave a polite nod. "I can start right away." "Good," he said. "You'll be bunkin in the workers' cabin. Bunk 3's empty. You'll be paired with me for now. I like to break in new hands myself." The way he said it didn't sound wrong exactly, but it had weight. Like he wanted to see what I was made of. Or maybe he already knew. The other hands were polite enough. Tommy, a younger guy with a chipped tooth and easy laugh. Marco, older and quiet, kept to himself. No one asked where I came from. No one offered much beyond a nod or a mumbled, "Hey." I didn't mind. I wasn't there to make friends. But Wade was always watching. He showed me how to muck stalls, how to throw a saddle without looking like an idiot, how to stack hay without wrecking your back. He didn't speak more than he had to, but when he did, I listened. His voice stuck with me, low, measured, with just enough grit to make it hard to forget. At dinner that first night, I sat at the far end of the long table, between Tommy and a wall. Wade sat at the head. He didn't say much, just nodded when he caught me looking. I forced myself to eat, stomach tight from the sun, the nerves, or maybe just the feeling that I didn't quite belong. Afterward, I washed up and headed to the bunkhouse. The cabins were basic. 4 bunks, 1 bathroom, barely enough space for a suitcase and boots. I got bunk 3 just like Wade said. The air was still and warm. Outside, the crickets were loud enough to drown out thought. I peeled off my shirt, wiped sweat from the back of my neck. I was just about to pull on a clean tee when I noticed a shadow at the cabin window. I froze. It wasn't long, just a glimpse. But I could have sworn it was him. The next second, it was gone. No knock, no word, just the hush of the breeze. I didn't sleep much that night. My body ached in places I didn't know could ache. But it wasn't just that. I kept thinking about the way his hand had lingered, the way his eyes had locked on mine, the silence between us that felt less like distance and more like a choice. I wasn't naive. I'd had thoughts before, quiet ones I'd stuffed down so deep they barely made a ripple anymore. But this was different. This was real. I told myself I was just tired, just anxious, just imagining things. But even in the dark, alone under a threadbare blanket, I could still feel his gaze on me, and it didn't feel bad. Felt like a warning, or maybe an invitation. The thing about Wade was he was everywhere. If I was up early to muck stalls, he was already there, leaning against a post with a thermos in hand. If I was feeding the horses, I'd hear the crunch of his boots before I saw him, always offering some piece of advice like, "Don't stand behind that one. She's got a temper." Or, "Try humming when you approach, calms him down." I started to wonder if he ever slept, or if he just waited for me to step outside so he could appear like some dust-covered ghost. Branding day came fast and hot. The calves were squirmy and loud, the air thick with smoke and burning hair. I kept my head down, did the job, let the heat and repetition drown everything else out. Every time I looked up, Wade was there, arms crossed, eyes on me, that unreadable expression on his face. When I finished a tricky tag on a stubborn calf, he said, "Good job, kid." But the way he said it, low, almost amused, made my skin tighten. Not in a bad way, just different. It was the kind of tone you don't forget, like being told something without the words. I caught myself watching his hands after that. The way he cleaned his knife with a rag. The way he adjusted his belt without a second thought. The veins on his forearms were visible even under the dust. At the end of each long day, I'd rinse off at the pump behind the stables. Shirt off, jeans rolled to my calves, hands numb from the cold. One evening, while the sun dipped low and turned the sky a burnt orange, I looked up mid-splash and froze. He was standing in the barn's open doorway, arms braced on the frame, just watching, not like a creep, not even like a man caught doing something wrong, just watching. I stared back, heart thudding in my chest, water dripping down my arms. He didn't look away, just lit a cigarette, the flame briefly outlining his face in the dim light, and gave me a nod before stepping back into the barn. I stood there a long time after he left, wondering what that had meant, if it meant anything at all. The next day, over coffee and biscuits in the mess hall, I leaned toward Tommy, the youngest hand, always chewing on something, always whistling, and asked, "Wade always watch people this much?" Tommy raised an eyebrow, slow and knowing. "He likes to keep his workers close," he said with a smirk, "especially the quiet ones." I pretended not to understand, but I did. That night, lying in my bunk, I couldn't keep my thoughts straight. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Wade leaning in that barn doorway. I heard his voice, rough, low, curling around that "good job, kid," like it was more than just praise. I imagined what it'd be like if he hadn't walked away, if he'd come closer instead, if he'd touched me, even just a hand on my back, or brushed his fingers over my jaw. I turned over hard, face burning, trying to force the thoughts down. They weren't new, just buried. I'd grown up in a town where you learned to keep quiet if you didn't want to get laughed at, or worse. I told myself it was easier to date women, or at least to pretend I liked them more than I liked the way a man like Wade looked walking through the dust, sleeves rolled, skin bronzed and lined with years of sun. But pretending had never made the wanting go away. And now, out here with nothing but sky, heat, and that man always nearby, it was getting harder to lie to myself. I hadn't told anyone who I was. Hell, I wasn't even sure I had the right words for it. But something in me twisted tighter every time he was near. Every time he looked at me like I was something he hadn't expected. Maybe that's what scared me the most. He wasn't looking at me like I was broken or wrong. He was looking at me like he was waiting for me to stop running. The sky was already bruising by the time we finished fixing the last bolt on the trough. Storm clouds crawled in over the ridge, thick and low like they meant business. Wade looked up, squinting against the wind, then motioned with his chin. "Shed's not far. Let's ride it out." We barely made it before the first crack of thunder rolled through the valley like a threat. Rain came heavy and sudden, hammering the tin roof above us. Inside the open-sided shed, the air smelled like wet hay and sweat. Wade pulled off his soaked hat and ran a hand through his damp hair, then tossed me a bottle from the old cooler tucked under the bench. "Ain't cold," he said, "but it'll do." I caught it, nodded, and twisted the cap off. Took a long pull. It was warm, flat, tasted like rain and dust. Still, it settled something tight in my chest. We didn't say much at first. Just sat on the bench, water dripping from our sleeves, boots muddy and legs stretched out in front of us. The rain pounded steady, like it had no plans of stopping soon. Wade leaned back and let out a slow breath. "Been a long time since I rode out a storm with company," he said, eyes half-lidded like he was thinking of somewhere else. "Yeah," I said. "You don't talk to the others much." "Don't need to." He took another drink. "Most of 'em are too young or too loud." Or both. He glanced at me, that same unreadable look. You're quiet. I guess. That's not a bad thing. We let the silence settle again. Somewhere outside, a horse whinnied in the distance. The wind picked up, whistling through the boards. Then he said it, just like that. No warning.
No pretense.
You ever been with a man, boy? The beer caught in my throat. I coughed hard, nearly spit it out. My heart slammed against my ribs like it was trying to break free. I turned toward him, ready to crack a joke or say something stupid, but he wasn't laughing. He wasn't even smiling. He just looked at me, steady and calm, like he'd asked me what time it was. I rubbed the back of my neck, heat crawling up under my ears. No. He nodded once. Didn't look away. Didn't say you had, he said. Then added quieter. But you ever want to? The shed felt too small. The air too thick. I couldn't look at him. I stared at the rain instead. At the way it ran in rivulets down the dirt, washing away prints, filling old ruts. I wanted to say something clever, or strong, or at least something that would make me feel less exposed. But I didn't say anything. I just sat there. Wade didn't push. He just sipped his beer and waited like he had all the time in the world. Like he knew silence said more than words ever could. Eventually he stood, stretched his arms over his head. The hem of his shirt lifted slightly, revealing the edge of a scar near his ribs. I looked away too fast. Storm'll pass soon, he said. We'll head back after. I nodded. But all I could think about, over the rain, over the thunder, was that question. Did I want to? And the truth I'd spent years burying felt closer than ever, rising like floodwater in my throat. That night, back in the bunkhouse, I lay awake long after the others had started snoring. The fan buzzed overhead, blades clicking in rhythm. I stared at the ceiling and replayed it all in my head. The beer, the storm, his voice. He hadn't mocked me. He hadn't smirked or baited. He'd just asked, like he was offering something, or maybe confessing. I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew what I kept imagining. The weight of his hand on the back of my neck, the scratch of stubble, the warmth of being seen. And I hated that part of me was scared of it. Scared of what it meant. Scared of what would happen if I ever said yes. But more than anything, I was scared of how much I wanted to. The next morning was quiet. Too quiet. No wind, no rustle from the horses, just the low hum of heat building under the sky. I was hauling feed to the lower barn when Wade stepped out of the shadows and caught me by the arm. Not rough, just firm. Walk with me. I followed. He didn't look back to check if I was coming. He knew I would. We crossed the pasture in silence, boots crunching on dry grass. A hawk circled overhead. When we reached the backside of the equipment shed, out of earshot and out of sight, he stopped and turned to me. You're good with your hands, he said, eyes scanning my face. You work hard. Don't complain. Show up early. I didn't know if he was building up to a compliment or a warning. I want to offer you something, he said. Straight up. I swallowed hard. Okay. I'll double your pay if you spend the night in my room. The words hit like a slap. I blinked. What? You heard me. I couldn't speak for a second. My mouth went dry. It sounded wrong. Cheap. Like he was offering me a job and a price tag all in one breath. I felt my jaw tighten. You trying to buy me, Wade? He didn't flinch. Didn't take a step forward or back. No, he said low and steady. I'm trying to be honest with you. I know what I want, and I ain't gonna play games about it. He stepped a little closer, voice softer now. You don't owe me anything. I don't expect you to say yes. I'm not pushing. I'm just tired of pretending I don't see you. I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because under the shock, under the anger that tried to rise in my throat, there was something else. Something heavier. He wasn't leering. He wasn't grinning. His eyes didn't hold lust. Not just lust. Anyway, there was loneliness in there. Something deeper than want. I turned and walked away without saying a word. He let me. That night, I lay on my cot, staring up at the cracked ceiling. I couldn't stop replaying it. Every word, every look, every pause. I was angry, but not just at him. Angry at myself for feeling the pull, for even considering it. I thought about the bank balance sitting just barely above zero, the bills I hadn't paid, the feeling of a body beside mine that I hadn't had in, God, how long? I thought about how I missed being touched. Not just the sex, not just the heat, but the way someone's hand on your back can quiet every storm inside you. Wade had touched me with his eyes more than once, and I'd let him. Was it really about the money? Or was it about saying yes to something I'd denied for too long? The next evening, after dinner, I found myself walking toward his room. I paused outside the door. My fist hovered mid-air, knuckles white. Then I knocked. He opened it without hesitation. Didn't speak. Didn't smile. Just stepped back and held the door wide. I stepped in. His room was simple. A bed, a lamp, boots by the door, the faint scent of saddle leather and with smoke clinging to everything. A fan hummed in the corner, lazy and slow. He closed the door behind me but didn't move any closer. I stood there, hands shoved in my pockets, waiting for him to reach for me. He didn't. Instead, he sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, head tilted slightly. His voice was quiet, gentle. You don't owe me anything, not even after tonight. That hit harder than the offer, because he meant it. There was no script. No moves. Just him. And me. I walked over slowly and sat beside him. Our knees brushed. My heart was thudding so loud I was sure he could hear it. He looked at me then, really looked, and I nodded once, barely, and that was all it took. He reached for my hand, not my belt, not my chest, my hand. His fingers were rough, calloused. They wrapped around mine like they belonged there. No words, just touch. We lay down side by side, clothes still on, breathing the same air. Minutes passed, then hours. Eventually, he pulled me closer, his arms slipping around my waist, my back against his chest. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The heat between us wasn't frantic. It wasn't wild. It was slow, careful, like we were both afraid of breaking something neither of us had ever been given before. I turned toward him in the dark, our faces inches apart. He pressed his forehead to mine, and for the first time in a long time, I let someone see me. Not just my body, but the part of me I'd hidden even from myself. The light coming through Wade's window was different than the bunkhouse. Softer, warmer. It brushed over the edges of the room like it didn't want to wake us. But I was already awake, lying there, heart pounding too loud in the quiet. The fan clicked overhead. His arm was still around my waist, heavy, warm, steady, like it belonged there. I held my breath for a second and let the feeling settle in. Then, slowly, I slid out from under it. He stirred but didn't say anything. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulled on my jeans, reached for my boots. My shirt was halfway across the floor, crumpled near the wall. Everything felt too loud. The rustle of fabric, the creak of the floorboards, even the breath in my throat. I didn't know what to say. Thanks? That felt wrong. So did pretending it hadn't happened. I stood to leave, shirt in hand, still barefoot. Then I heard his voice behind me, rougher than usual, but calm. You runnin'? I froze. I turned halfway, not meeting his eyes. No. He didn't reply. I waited a few seconds, then slipped out the door and shut it behind me. Back in the bunkhouse, I dropped onto my cot like I'd just come back from war. My chest felt tight, my mouth dry, and even though my body ached in places I hadn't used in a while, all I could think about was the way he'd said it. You runnin'? I wasn't. Not really. But I didn't stick around either. And for the next few days I kept my distance. I took on the early morning shifts, saddled up before anyone else. I volunteered to clean the east stables, the ones nobody liked because they backed up to the swampy creek. I skipped dinner in the mess hall, choosing instead to eat a peanut butter sandwich outside under the sycamore tree. Wade didn't come after me. He didn't call me out, but I caught him watching me more than once. When I brought in the hay truck, he was leaning on the railing, arms folded, gaze unreadable. When I brushed the horses at dusk, I felt his eyes on my back before I even turned. When I passed him in the hallway by the supply shed, his hand brushed mine, just briefly. Not an accident. And every time he looked at me the same way, softer, like he knew something had shifted, and was waiting to see what I'd do about it. It was 3 nights later when he knocked. Not loud, just a soft, almost hesitant knock on my bunkhouse door. I was sitting on the edge of my cot, shirtless, a book open on my lap I hadn't touched in 20 minutes. The knock made me jump, even though I think I'd been expecting it. I opened the door, heart in my throat. Wade stood there, arms at his sides, not in his usual work shirt. Just a plain gray tee and jeans that looked older than me. His hair was damp. He'd clearly just washed off. He looked different. Not younger. Not vulnerable. Just real. He nodded once. Wasn't just a night for me. That was all he said. But it was enough. I stepped back, letting him in without a word. The door clicked shut behind him. We stood there in the quiet, just looking at each other. No talk of money. No mention of jobs or bunk assignments or horses that needed worming. I stepped closer. He didn't move, but his breathing changed. And when I leaned in and kissed him, slow, careful, like we had all the time in the world, he exhaled against my mouth like he'd been holding that breath for days. This time we didn't rush. We undressed each other piece by piece, not like strangers or bargaining men, but like people who were finally admitting something out loud. It wasn't desperate. It was deliberate. Every touch said something. When he held my face in his hands, it said, "I see you." When I unbuttoned his jeans and rested my forehead against his chest, it said, "I've been waiting." And when we lay down, tangled in cotton sheets and twilight, he wrapped his arm around me like he didn't plan on letting go. We didn't speak. Didn't need to. The silence between us was full this time, of breath, of truth, of something starting to bloom. Afterward, we stayed like that, skin to skin, heart somewhere in the quiet between our ribs. His fingers drew lazy shapes across my lower back. Mine curled into the hem of his shirt like I wasn't ready to let the night end. He kissed the top of my shoulder. And I knew then this wasn't about paychecks. It wasn't even about sex. It was about him. And it was about me. And the space we were finally making between us for something real. It didn't take long for the whispers to start. I should have known better. A ranch this size with bunkhouses this close. Privacy wasn't real. People talk. People watch. And somebody, somewhere, saw Wade leaving my room before sunrise. After that, everything felt different. The morning after, I walked into the mess hall like usual. Grabbed my plate. Poured coffee. But when I went to sit at the end of the long table, Tommy, usually the first to crack a joke, barely looked up. Marco, who always nodded once like clockwork, just kept eating. No one said anything outright. But silence has a sound. And this one was loud. By lunchtime, it wasn't just silence. It was side eyes. It was laughter that stopped when I walked by. It was the way 2 ranch hands suddenly needed to check fence posts on the opposite side of the field when they saw Wade and me working the troughs together. I didn't say a word, but I felt every glance like a needle to the skin. Wade didn't flinch. He walked beside me, same as always, handing me tools, cracking dry jokes, correcting my grip on the halter rope like we were the only 2 people on the damn planet. If he noticed the change, he didn't let it show. But I saw it. The tightness in his jaw. The way he scanned the yard before we moved from one station to the next. Like he was watching the horizon for trouble. Came faster than I expected. 3 days later, I was brushing down a chestnut mare in the east barn when I heard boots behind me. Fast, hard steps. I turned just in time to see Wade shove one of the hands. Derek, big guy, mean streak the size of Texas, up against the stable wall. Hard. Dust flew from the boards. "What did you just say?" Wade growled. Derek's face was red. "Just making conversation," he spat. Didn't know this place turned into a brothel. Didn't know the boss was talking his boys to bed like. Wade's fist slammed into the wood beside Derek's head. Not a punch. A warning. But damn near shook the whole barn. "You want to keep talking, Derek?" Wade hissed. "Go ahead. But you won't be talking from this ranch." Derek stared him down, then looked at me, disgust thick in his eyes. "You're soft," he said. "Both of you." Wade let go of his shirt. "Get your things. You're done here." Derek stormed out, muttering something under his breath that I couldn't hear, and maybe didn't want to. The barn was quiet again. Wade turned to me, chest still rising hard with every breath. His hands were shaking. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said, though my heart was still thudding in my throat. We didn't talk about it again until that night. I found him out by the corral, leaning on the rail, cigarette glowing in the dark. I walked up beside him and stood there in silence for a while, both of us watching the moonlight shimmer on the horses' backs as they moved slow and peaceful across the field. "Why'd you risk that?" I finally asked. "You didn't have to go after him." He looked at me, face calm now but tired. "'Cause I ain't hiding anymore," he said. "And I don't want you to either." I didn't know what to say to that. I'd spent so much of my life trying to disappear, trying to keep my voice even, my walk straight, my eyes from lingering too long. But Wade, he didn't apologize for who he was. Not even when it got messy. He wasn't ashamed. And maybe I didn't want to be either. I stepped a little closer. His shoulder brushed mine. He didn't move away. The barn door behind us creaked in the wind. The scent of hay and cedar and something that was just him wrapped around me. And then I kissed him. Right there. In the open barn. No hiding. No shadows. No locked doors. I just leaned in, pressed my mouth to his, soft and sure. He didn't flinch. Didn't look around to see who might be watching. He just kissed me back. Slow and steady. Like he'd been waiting for me to meet him halfway. When we pulled apart, he let his hand rest on my jaw, thumb brushing under my cheekbone. "You sure?" he asked. I nodded. For the first time in a long time the end snuck up on me faster than I expected. 60 days. That's what I signed on for when I came to the ranch, temporary work, just enough to get me by. A patch job on a life full of loose ends and broken plans. I wasn't planning on staying. I wasn't planning on feeling anything either. But the calendar didn't care. My contract was up at the end of the week. I hadn't told anyone yet. Not even Wade. I figured I'd pack my things, shake a few hands, and disappear the same way I came in. Quiet, unremarkable, forgettable. That was the plan. Until he showed up at my door while I was folding shirts and staring at the bottom of an empty duffel bag like it held answers. He didn't knock. Just opened the door and stood there like he'd been waiting for the silence to say something. "You plannin' on leaving without saying a word?" he asked. I turned, held his gaze for a beat. "I figured it'd be easier that way." He stepped inside, closed the door behind him, and leaned against it, arms crossed, that same unreadable look on his face. But this time, there was a tightness around his eyes. "You done running?" he asked, voice low. I didn't answer right away, because the truth was I didn't know. "I don't even know what I am," I said, quietly. "I don't have a label. I don't have a plan. I just needed work. And you made it complicated." Wade uncrossed his arms, stepped forward. "No," he said. "I made it real." He looked me straight in the eye. "And I know what you are. You're the man I've been waiting for." That stopped everything in me. My hands, my breath, my excuses. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a key on a leather strap. "There's a cabin," he said, "behind the hay fields. Old one. Used to be for visiting trainers. Needs a little fixing up, but it's got a porch, a stove, and a hell of a view." I didn't move. He stepped closer, gently pressing the key into my palm. "It's yours, if you want it." I stared down at the key, felt its weight settle in my hand like a question I didn't know I was ready to answer. "I don't know if I can be what you think I am," I whispered. Wade brushed a knuckle along my jaw, eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "I don't want perfect," he said. "I want you, here, with me, not just at night, not just in the quiet." I looked up at him. This man who'd been patient when I ran, gentle when I was scared, and steady when I didn't know who I was. He wasn't asking me to change. He was asking me to stay. I didn't say yes. Not right away. Instead, I took his hand. His fingers curled around mine, firm and warm and sure. We walked out together, past the horses, past the barn, past the edge of what I used to be. He led me to the cabin. It was small, 2 rooms, a rusted tin roof, windows dusty with years of disuse. But the view, it opened wide to the valley, the fields stretching golden in the setting sun, wind stirring the grass like a quiet song. "This," Wade said, sliding an arm around my waist, "is where we start." I leaned into him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was trying to escape something. For the first time, I felt like I'd come home. The mornings come easier now. There's a rhythm to them, a kind of quiet magic I never thought I'd be allowed to have. I wake up before the sun breaks over the hills. Wade's arm is always around me, heavy and warm, like he's still afraid I'll vanish if he lets go. Sometimes I stay a little longer, just breathing in the scent of him. Pine soap, leather, the faintest trace of hay, and the comfort of that slow, steady heartbeat pressed against my back. But eventually I slip out of bed, pull on one of his old flannel shirts, and start the coffee. His kitchen is mine now, too. I know where he keeps everything, the mugs with chipped rims, the cinnamon he only pretends not to like, the tin of sugar he labels salt to keep the other hands out. The table still wobbles and the floorboards still creak, but it feels like ours. I make breakfast while he pulls on jeans, buttoning his shirt slowly, watching me like I'm some kind of miracle. Every time, like he still doesn't believe I'm real. We don't talk much in the mornings. We don't have to. He'll brush a kiss across my temple, murmur a thank you when I hand him his coffee, and we'll sit on the porch in the cold air, watching the valley wake up. It's been 4 months since I moved into the cabin. 4 months of slow building routines and quiet touches and shared blankets and tired, happy nights. 4 months of not hiding. The work's still hard. Ranch life doesn't slow down for love. But I don't mind the calluses anymore. I don't mind the sweat, because I'm not just working. I'm building something now. Something that feels like a future. I split my time between the horses and the house. I still bunk with the guys during branding season, still haul fence posts and fix busted irrigation lines. But at the end of the day, I go home. And home is him. Cook more now. Wade helps sometimes. Badly but sweetly. Standing behind me with his arms wrapped around my waist while I stir soup or slice potatoes, pretending to supervise but mostly just trying to distract me. He calls me his better half when he talks to the neighbors. Once, while we were sitting on the porch after a long day, he looked over at me, smirked and said, "You do realize you're already my wife, right?" I laughed. "That's so? You make the coffee, sleep on my side of the bed, keep my socks in your drawer. Hell, you're wearing my flannel right now." I looked down at myself, then back at him. "Guess I am." He winked. "Might as well make it official someday. But until then." He leaned in and kissed me. Slow, deep, tender. No one was watching. But even if they were, I wouldn't have stopped him. That's what's changed the most. The fear? It's gone. Or maybe not gone. Just smaller. Like a shadow you get used to until the light hits it just right and you realize it was never that big to begin with. We had neighbors over last weekend. Older couple from the ranch up the road. Martha and Eugene, married 50 years, sharp as nails and kind as saints. They brought fresh pie. We made roast chicken. Wade said grace. I poured the wine. At one point during the meal, Martha asked how long we'd been roommates. Wade didn't hesitate. "We're together," he said, setting his hand on mine right there at the table. No shame, no jokes, just fact. Martha didn't flinch. Eugene nodded, said, "Well, that's good. You're easier to talk to now, Wade." We all laughed. After they left, Wade stood by the door for a while, quiet. "You ever think we'd get this?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not in this life." He turned to me, eyes a little wet, voice soft. "Well, we got it now." Sometimes I still think about how it all started. That first week. How lost I felt. How sure I was that this was just a pit stop. A job. Paycheck. And how one man with a steady gaze and a slow voice broke through all of that. He saw me. when I didn't even know how to see myself. I remember the night he offered me money for one night, and I said yes, thinking it was desperation. But it wasn't. It was the beginning of something I never imagined I'd be brave enough to have. Now, I kiss him in the daylight. I wear his shirts. I fall asleep with his hand on my chest and wake up to the sound of his voice, rough and low and full of love. And I'm not afraid anymore. I came here broke and scared. He saw me when I didn't even see myself. He offered money, but what I needed was love. And he gave me that too. Not because I said yes, but because I stayed. What would you have done if someone offered love, but it came disguised as a deal? Would you have walked away or stayed to see what it could become? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read every one. And if this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional, powerful gay love stories every day.